Welcome to another episode of real-life haunted stories. If you love chilling tales and spine-tingling horror stories, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a scare. New nightmares drop every week. Stay haunted. So, let's start our today's episode. Today, I am going to share 3 real-life scary stories about Jinnah, which were collected from that late-night Uber driver at New York City. Today's all stories will keep you up tonight. Story 1. The Mystery of the Mala House. In a remote village in Naugaon, Bangladesh, called Chargazi, there stood an ancient mansion known as the Mala House. The house, built near a river, was surrounded by rice fields, palm trees, and dense bamboo groves. The villagers spoke of it in hushed tones, for anyone who dared to enter after dark never returned. According to legend, a wandering peer, Saint Hamadi, had once visited the village and warned that a powerful jinn had been sealed beneath the house. The peer had cast a spell to trap the entity, but before leaving, he gave a dire warning. If the seal is ever broken, the village will suffer unimaginable horrors. For generations, a particular room in Mala House remained locked. No one dared to open it. But on a cold winter night in 2023, 2 reckless young men, Shahin and Jassim, decided to test their courage by entering the house. They had no idea of the terror they were about to unleash. Inside, a foul stench filled the air. The walls were covered in faded Arabic inscriptions. In the dim glow of their phone flashlights, they noticed an old clay jar, tightly bound with a blunt red string. "What is this?" Jassim asked. "Looks old, but there's definitely something inside," Shahin replied. Ignoring their growing unease, Shahin untied the string. A sudden tremor shook the room. A chilling wind howled through the house, and a piercing whistle-like sound filled the air. The doors and windows slammed shut on their own. Shahin and Jassim froze. They had made a terrible mistake. The next morning, the villagers gathered in front of Mala House. No one had seen or heard from Jadid, Shahin, and Jassim since the previous night, but around midnight, people had heard terrifying screams echo through the village. When they finally forced the door open, the room was empty, except for 2 blackened burn marks on the floor and piles of ash scattered everywhere, as if someone had been incinerated where they stood. The village imam, an elderly man, whispered in fear, "They broke the seal. Now the village will pay the price." That night, the village was plunged into chaos. Shadowy figures lurked near doorsteps, disembodied whispers echoed through the fields, and unseen hands knocked on doors at midnight. But when the villagers opened them, no one was there. An old woman, the village's last surviving storyteller, warned, "There's no saving them now. The only way to stop this is to hold the pier's sacred ritual again. Otherwise, the jinn will consume us all." The next day, the villagers gathered in the ruins of Puam Mala House, searching for any trace of the pier's old writings. In a hidden compartment beneath the collapsed wall, they found an ancient manuscript detailing a special prayer that could trap the jinn once more. For 3 nights, the villagers held a mass prayer in the mosque. The imam, along with the village elders, then led a final ritual inside Mala House. As they recited the holy verses, a powerful force shook the earth. A horrific, inhuman scream filled the air. "I will return. You cannot stop me." Then, Suddenly, silence. The house began to crack and crumble, collapsing into a heap of rubble. Relief washed over the villagers. The jihad had been sealed again. But as the imam solemnly reminded them, you can trap a jinn, but its curse never truly ends. Even today, no one in Chargazi village dares to step outside at night, because if you ever hear someone whispering your name in the darkness, you may never return. Story 2. The Jinn of Goragat Forest. In the heart of rural Bangladesh, near the dense Goragat Forest, there once stood a village called Majipara. The villagers lived simple lives, farming and fishing, but they never ventured into the eastern side of the forest. There was a rule: never cross the old banyan tree after sunset. Elders whispered that a jinn had claimed that part of the forest centuries ago. It was said that those who ignored the warning were never seen again. One night, a traveling merchant named Rahim Uddin arrived in Majipara. He laughed off the villagers' fears, calling them superstitious fools. Ghosts and jinn? You people live in the past, he scoffed. Ignoring their warnings, Rahim set up camp beneath the cursed banyan tree. By morning, he was gone. At dawn, the village men searched the forest. Rahim's belongings were scattered near the tree. His horse stood nearby, trembling, its eyes wild with terror. But Rahim himself had vanished. Not a single footprint, not a single trace of struggle. Only one thing remained. On the tree trunk, fresh scratch marks, long, deep gouges, as if something with claws had scraped against it. That night, strange things began happening in Majipara. Children woke up screaming, saying a tall, shadowy figure was standing outside their windows. Cattle went missing, their bloodied remains found near the banyan tree. And at exactly midnight, an eerie, inhuman wailing echoed from the forest. The village knew. They had angered the jinn. 3 nights later, Ayesha, a young woman from the village, suddenly collapsed out in the middle of the courtyard. Her body twisted unnaturally. Her eyes rolled back, and from her lips came a voice, not her own. You disturbed me. Now I will take what is mine. Her voice was deep, guttural, not human. The villagers were horrified. Aisha had been possessed by the jinn. The imam and village elders gathered, reciting verses from the Quran. They sprinkled holy water around her, but the jinn laughed. You think your words can drive me away? This is my home, and now she is mine. Suddenly, Aisha's body levitated, her limbs twitching violently. A strong wind rushed through the house. Even though the doors and windows were shut, the villagers knew they had little time. If they didn't act fast, Aisha would be lost forever. The village's oldest peer, spiritual leader, was called from a neighboring village. He arrived at sunset, carrying an ancient clay lamp. This jinn is old, powerful, he muttered. Only fire can drive it away. That night, in the center of the village, they lit a sacred fire. The peer began chanting, his voice deep and commanding. Aisha's body thrashed violently, and the air grew heavy with an unbearable, rotting stench. Suddenly, Aisha let out a blood-curdling scream. The flames of the fire rose unnaturally high, and for a split second, a shadowy figure with glowing red eyes could be seen within them. Then, silence. Aisha collapsed, unconscious. The wind died down. The fire returned to normal. The jinn was gone. Or so they thought. Days passed and the village seemed normal again. But then, the village well dried up overnight. Fishermen found all their nets torn, as if something had shredded them with claws. And every night, the sound of someone laughing softly echoed from the banyan tree. The pier sighed. The jinn may have left her body, but it still lingers. Majapara was never the same again. Over the years, families abandoned their homes, moving far away from Goragat Forest. And now, the village is nothing but ruins, swallowed by the jungle. But if you ever pass by the old banyan tree at night, some say you can still hear a faint whisper calling your name. Story 3, The Cursed Well of Shonapur. In the quiet village of Shonapur, there was an old, forgotten well. No one used it. No one went near it. Thick vines had grown over its edges, and the villagers had built a new well far away. People said the old well was cursed. It was once the source of life for the village, but decades ago, something terrible happened. A young girl named Meherun had fallen into it. Her body was never recovered. Since then, anyone who drank from the well fell sick or disappeared under mysterious circumstances. One night, a reckless teenager named Farid, tired of hearing the old stories, decided to prove everyone wrong. "Water is just water," he laughed. "There is no curse." Ignoring his friend's warnings, he went to the well at midnight. He tied a bucket to a rope, dropped it into the darkness, and pulled it up. The water looked normal, but as soon as he took a sip, a chill ran through his body. The wind stopped. The crickets fell silent. Then, from deep inside the well, he heard it, a whisper. "Return my body." Farid screamed. The bucket slipped from his hands. He ran back home, his heart pounding. The next morning, his body was found floating inside the well. After Farid's death, the village was thrown into panic. The elders performed special prayers, hoping to cleanse the land. But the very next night, something even stranger happened. Farid's mother, devastated by grief, claimed she saw her son standing outside their house, even though he was already buried. She rushed outside, calling his name, but the figure turned and walked away toward the well. She followed, trembling, but when she got there, he was gone. Only the sound of water dripping echoed from below. That night, more villagers began reporting visions. They saw the shadowy figure standing near the well, sometimes a boy, sometimes a young girl in a white dress. The elders whispered, "The spirit in the well is awake again." A week later, a 10-year-old girl named Rima went missing. Her parents searched everywhere, but she was nowhere to be found. Then, at dawn, she returned, but something was wrong. She didn't speak, didn't blink, just sat in the courtyard, staring at the sky. When her mother touched her shoulder, Rima slowly turned her head, her neck cracking. She smiled, but her teeth were blackened, her lips dry, and when she finally spoke, her voice was not her own. "You didn't bury me." Rima's mother collapsed, screaming. The village knew. The jinn from the well had taken her. The elders called for a pir, a man known for fighting dark spirits. He listened carefully and finally said, "The jinn is restless because the girl's body was never found. Until her remains are recovered and given a proper burial, this will not stop." So the villagers gathered near the old well, preparing to search. But the moment they touched the rope, a powerful gust of wind roared through the trees. The well began to shake. The ground trembled, and then the water turned red. The villagers staggered back in horror, but the pier held his ground, chanting sacred verses. Slowly, the wind died down, and the well grew silent. Once more, taking a deep breath, they lowered the bucket one last time. And when they pulled it back up, inside was a small, brittle skull. The village gave the remains a proper burial, performing all the necessary rites. That night, for the first time in decades, the well remained silent. No whispers, no visions. The villagers thought the nightmare was over. But before leaving, the pier gave one last warning. The jinn has left, but the well will never be clean again. Bury it, cover it with stone. Never let anyone near it. And so they did. To this day, the old well of Shonapur remains sealed, hidden beneath layers of bricks and earth. But those who live near it say that on some nights, when the wind is still, if you listen very carefully, you can still hear water dripping deep below. And sometimes, just sometimes, a whisper, "Return, my body." Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, to show your support, comment to share your thoughts or ask questions, and don't forget to subscribe to stay updated with our latest content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload.